All right, it's 12 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and do this. Thanks for joining me again. So we are on week 4 of this. Week 4, which is fucking mental. Originally, I would said like I had an agenda in my head. I was like, week 1 we'll do nutrition, week 2 we'll do habits, week 3 we'll go back to do a bit more nutrition, and week 4 we'll make it open forum. Well, I've got at least another month of this. So if you have any questions that you feel like you want answered, or strategies that you want help around, anything really specific, or even anything super broad, let me know. Shoot something in the comments, send me an email, spoke signal, carrier pigeon, whatever you want to do. So yes, know that that's the case, because we're going to be doing this for a while, apparently. Okay, so for those of you who can't see me on Instagram, I will do the same thing that I've done every week, apart from week 2, where I forgot to hit record, and I will put the slides up later on, and I kind of just put them out as a video, put it on YouTube, and you can watch it, and you can kind of have some context. If there's anything that you want to go back to, there are slides accompanying everything that we end up talking about today. So as I say every week, the goal is to understand some of your most challenging nutritional hurdles, categorize these issues. So often they're either going to be nutritional or they're going to be habitual, and then try and highlight some actionable steps to deal with those biggest problems for you. So we've had some good questions come in this week, and we'll get started right into the first one. So the first question I was asked is actually by one of our members, Janet, who she is typically an endurance runner, does some strength training with us, obviously, to help that endurance, but rides her bike a lot, does some Ironman, Ironwoman races, was supposed to run the marathon, I believe, this time around. So does a lot of endurance work. And she asked me, she said, I get really hungry the day after a hard workout, but not immediately after. So, she trains at 6 o'clock at night. She goes home. She doesn't feel super hungry. But the day after, she's really kicked up an appetite. And she asked, how do we deal with this? Well, the first thing to understand is, do we see that as a good thing or a bad thing? Because if we see it as a good thing, then we don't really have to deal with it at all, right? We can eat as we want to, we can eat when we need to. If we see it as a bad thing, let's say, for example, like, having a bigger appetite later on in the day, or maybe the day after, leads to overconsumption, then obviously we can put some strategies in place there. So one of the things I'll challenge people to do, especially the people that I work with one-on-one with nutrition coaching, is think of nutrition less of a day-to-day thing, right? So the 24-hour thing is a man-made construct, right? Your body doesn't know if it's Monday, Friday, or Sunday. Doesn't know. We put these kind of ideas upon ourselves as like, well, it's a Monday, so I have to do X. It's a Tuesday, so I have to do Y. Your body doesn't really know. And when it comes to nutrition, think more of it as like an ongoing energy balance, intake versus output. Nutrient timing isn't as important as some of the other big factors, which are total calories consumed, and then potentially just where you're getting those calories from, so in your macros. So nutrient timing is like third on the pyramid in terms of importance. Yeah, it's very useful, and if you can work on nutrient timing, then great, but nail down the first 2 to begin with. So make sure that we're nailing down our caloric balance versus our energy intake and output, and make sure that we're just getting a good spread of our calories throughout carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Okay, so say for example, like I said to Janet, because I will message her specifically. I kind of have a very specific answer. So if you do an especially hard workout, let's say for example, like it's a longer tempo run. So I was trying to speak specifically to what Janet might be doing. Then maybe you can spread some additional calories out over your upcoming 3 or 4 meals, even if that goes into the following day. All right. So again, you don't have to eat all your calories based off your energy balance in that day. It's a 24-hour window, but you can also keep eating into a 168-hour window. You can stretch the extra calories out over the week if you need to. Think of it, as I said, less like, super important for it to be nutrient timing. Get the balance of good quality foods and the right amount of energy versus input versus output. So what you do want to do, however, is to make sure that you're maximizing your gains and to make sure that you're aiding your recovery. I would always advise somebody to try and get at least a little bit of protein and a little bit of carbohydrates respectively. Maybe 30 grams of protein, 100 grams of carbohydrates is a good number to be around if you've done an especially hard training session within about 30 to 60 minutes of post-training. So the reason that's important is because you know, your body is looking for nutrients. It's looking to take on something to help it support, to kind of bring its energy back up. If you've just drained the tank in a hard training session, it's looking for something to try and get some energy balance back so that you don't crash and have these big blood sugar waves of feeling, feel absolutely smoked. And then you wait too long, you overconsume later on, and then you get like that digestive kind of Thanksgiving feeling where you consume loads of food and you feel a bit crazy, feel a bit stuffed, feel a bit kind of lethargic. So that's the first thing, is to try and get something in to kind of bring your energy back to balance. Secondarily, making sure that you get some protein in will allow you to get a little bit more out of your gains in terms of just supporting muscle recovery. All right. And that can look like a different type of meal. So, you know, a lot of people have a protein shake post training. It's not essential that you have a protein shake specifically. Like, you don't have to have a supplementary protein powder in a shaker. Like, that's not essential. But if that's the best way for you to get the necessary calories, the necessary spread of macronutrients across carbohydrates and protein, if that's the most convenient way, and you can get a lot of calorie, or the right amount of calories and the right amount of protein and carbohydrates in via a shake within 30 to 60 minutes, and it doesn't kind of like overburden you, then great. That might, you know, supplements like that might be a great option for you. So if you're the kind of person that is finding yourself to not be super hungry post training, but you want to make sure that you get the most out of your exercise and your recovery, then a protein shake is a pretty good option. All right. So if that's not you, if you're not a big fan of protein shakes and you don't necessarily want to go over, you don't necessarily want to like eat right after, think about spreading your extra calories out over the next couple of days. So if I have a really hard training session late at night, or I play football late at night, I don't come home and eat because I just don't feel full. But the morning after, I might just get a few more calories in. Now, providing I'm getting those calories through some whole foods, some meat, potatoes, vegetables, that kind of stuff, you know, I'm not really doing anything, super detrimental to myself just by eating 12 hours later. You know, the idea of nutrient timing is still being looked at. Getting the most out of nutrient timing is still being looked at by nutritional science, and like, you know, all the people in the know in white jackets with test tubes. Those people are still looking at like the best way to get to play with nutrient timing. Right now, just focus on getting your total amount of calories and energy balance, kind of something similar, and thinking about eating for recovery versus eating for weight loss if your goal is like, you know, athletic performance. So there's a couple of scientific reasons, however, obviously, why you might not be super hungry post-training, especially if you've been doing endurance training. So this isn't necessarily a phantom feeling. It is a reason. There is a reason you're feeling that way. If you're doing some endurance training, you might be more hungry like 12 or so hours later. And that's likely because of the suppression of the hunger signaling hormone ghrelin, which you might have heard of it before, you might not have heard before, but I figured I'd give you some scientific background as to why you might be feeling that particular way, because it was also give some scope as to allowing you to feel that way and not feeling like you have to stuff yourself with a protein shake if it's just something that you don't want to do. So yeah, you're going to get there'll be a suppression of ghrelin, which is your hunger signaling hormone, and likely an increase of peptide YY, which is one of the an increase of peptide YY, which is your something that basically tells your body that you're not that hungry anymore. So you're going to get an increase of that, and it suppresses your hunger response right after. And that's just something that simply comes out of the response that your muscles give to the rest of your body after you've done more endurance-based training. All right. So I tried to give the Cliff Notes version of that there. There's obviously a lot more in-depth information that you can go into. But there are obviously scientific reasons as to why you might feel a particular way. What I will always say, and this is kind of coach's kind of get out of jail card here, is like, do what works best for you. It depends on how you feel. If you're looking for recovery, you will need some extra calories. If you're looking for weight loss, you'll need just enough calories to be able to maintain muscle mass and still be creating a calorie deficit. Okay. So to aid recovery, remember, you're going to want to eat something that's nutrient dense, but that doesn't necessarily, or calorie dense, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to eat a giant volume of food. So you can get a lot of calories out of a tablespoon of peanut butter, as I'm sure we all know. If you've ever measured out a single serving of peanut butter and realized how many calories are in it, it's probably a very depressing moment for me, you, and everybody else. But it doesn't mean that you have to consume a large amount of food. just to get a large amount of calories in, right? You can work on calorie density. So a protein shake likely isn't going to overburden you. You'll begin to start feeling full. It'll aid your recovery, but you're not going to feel like you're stuffing yourself full of food, even though you aren't that hungry. Okay. So all in all, think about a protein shake, Janet. All right. Hopefully that covered some stuff there, and we'll move on to the next bit. So the next bit, I'll try my very best to not get on Britishisms and rants about. But somebody asked me a question, and at first I was kind of like, of course that's not a thing. And then I realized, actually, why wouldn't people think that? We are told very specific things about very specific products. So the question I was asked was, are juice cleanses worth doing? And if they are worth doing, should I only do them in the morning? Just let that one sink in. Are juice cleanses worth doing? And if they are worth doing, should I only do them in the morning? So there's a lot to unpack there. So I'll start by saying there is nothing magic about juice, period, right? There's nothing magic about juice. If there was something magic about juice, in the 60s and 70s, where you were told to have a glass of juice first thing in the morning, those people would be indestructible and still be alive and superheroes, right? Because there's so much juice consumed. There is nothing magic about juice. People often feel a little bit better when they do something like a juice cleanse, but it's not the addition of juice that is magic that makes them feel like they might have a little bit more energy or they feel a little less lethargic. It's almost always what juice is replacing. So they have juice instead of having, refined sugary cereal or a Pop-Tart or nothing, or something that they grab on the go and stuff down their face. There's maybe a little bit more processed so that it's shelf stable. So it's not the addition of something like juice that is super useful and makes people feel great, but it's what juice is ultimately replacing. There's obviously some mental aspect to it as well. So there is a confirmation bias of what I'm doing right now is the best thing that I could possibly be doing. So whether you're actually getting a physical response from it or not, you still might feel really good, even though the juice is doing literally nothing for you other than you drinking juice, nothing other than that. So the idea of a cleanse is a bit crazy because you can't cleanse the human body. You can, but not with juice. I'll leave the rest up to your imagination. So we have, every one of our organs is separated by a bilipid membrane that, it keeps all the things out from basically crossing over, and like my heart and my lungs doing half a job each, and my stomach and my intestines doing half a job each. They're all very separate. Now, just because I run some juice through my digestive system doesn't mean that it's being cleansed. Again, people might feel a little bit more energetic, and that's likely because even though the juice is there, they're actually replacing something that's maybe a little bit more processed and maybe forces lethargy on them or makes them feel lethargic. And it's the absence of that thing versus the addition of juice that might make them feel that way. And obviously I'm giving juice a bad rap, but the same with fit teas, or the same with, weight loss pills that have green tea extract in them. Any of those things that are peddled to us that seem a little too good to be true are always a little too good to be true. And there is no replacement for eating some meat and vegetables, getting 8 hours of sleep, drinking plenty of water, doing some exercise, and balancing your calories in versus energy out. That is it, right? That's what's going to give us the results that we want, depending on how we play with those variables, give or take. There is nothing magic about any one of the extra things that we can put on top. If there are any additional properties, they're literally in the 0.0000 percentile that they aren't going to make a massive difference anyway. So don't put too much stock in those things. On the other hand, juice is less impressive, but smoothies make a little bit more sense for people. So when we juice something, we ultimately take the fiber out of it. We take the mass out of it. So we still feel a little bit hungry when we drink juices, but when we've got a little bit more fiber is actually the thing that has the actual cleansing idea, the cleansing property. Like the roughage that you might eat through fruit is the thing that is going to aid digestion, is the thing that is going to speed up digestion and kind of get things moving a little bit more. So when it comes to things like smoothies, that makes a little bit more sense. But again, understand that smoothies, whatever you put in them, have some calories, right? They're not magic. They're not just because it comes in a smoothie form, does it mean that it's devoid of calories? Does it mean that it's, somehow magic and it actually takes away calories? It's got negative calories from whatever you eat next. None of those things are ultimately happening. Okay, so the juices remove the fiber and the roughage of the fruit, pretty much rendering it useless. And its minimal cleansing properties are just kind of taken away. right? If you take the fiber out of it, the cleansing properties that you might get from it are no longer there. Smoothies are a much better option. They still won't cleanse anything, but they will aid digestion. They will, if you keep the fiber of the fruit or whatever you're putting in there, it will get things moved along digestively. Smoothies are just blended food, making it simpler to digest, maybe a little bit more portable, more versatile, and maybe a little easier to bring some uncommon ingredients together. Like, I would probably never put spinach and peanut butter together in their raw forms. I don't know about you guys, but when you put it in a smoothie, it tastes all right. And then you put a banana in it and a bit of almond milk, and it all somehow tastes pretty good. But so it's a good way to kind of get some uncommon ingredients together and get a little bit of everything all in one bottle. But yeah, oranges and kale was the other thing I wrote there. Not that good, not for me. So no, juice cleanses, ultimately, whoever asked me this question, juice cleanses are not worth your time. Instead, aim to consume more fruits and vegetables in their whole and raw form and steer away from more processed options. That's going to be the best bang for your buck. That's going to be the best use of your time. So yeah, outside of whether it's talking specifically about juices or not, or whether we're talking about any of the other things. And there's also obviously the same kind of category fits into fitness equipment. Something where you can sit on the couch and electrode yourself into abs and get all your fat away, or like whatever those belts are that people are putting on and like sweating specifically out of their abdominal region. All nonsense. All right, pick things up, put things down. Do that well. Do it consistently. Get a good sweat on. Breathe deep. And if you want to lose weight, balance your calorie intake. If you want to gain muscle, balance your calorie intake specifically towards that thing. If you want to hit a certain performance, balance your calorie intake specifically towards that. Calories, macronutrients, timing comes next, and we can play with a couple of other bits afterwards. But focus on those big rocks. Don't look for anything magic, because unfortunately, it just isn't there. I say unfortunately. Fortunately, it just isn't there, because that way I've got a job. Okay, so the last question that came in was something that was kind of worth unpacking, maybe a little bit bigger. So the person that asked me the question was, what's the best thing to do to maintain my body weight during quarantine? So like, I think she was ultimately asking like, what are the biggest bang for my buck things that I can do? I didn't have much more context from that. So this is a relatively general answer, but there's lots of information in it. So you could probably pull a little bit of something from this for yourself. So ultimately, there is no one perfect answer. So I've tried to put some things in categories here. So made some assumptions. So the first answer I wrote, so is assuming that you have your nutrition and training under control, and you're looking to balance your calorie intake, but you're now struggling, like you're training an hour a day and you're eating mostly whole foods, meat, vegetables, that kind of stuff, fruit, getting enough sleep. Like if you're in a pretty good place, but now what you're seeing is you're missing out on those extra calories that maybe you get from the walk to and from the bus stop, the, walking up and downstairs in the office, those extra 200, 300 calories of what we would call NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or walking, basically just walking around, doing some stuff. Those extra calories that kind of make the difference over time. Maybe now you're not getting them because all you're doing is getting up out of bed and walking to wherever your respective homemade desk is, and then walking back there later on. If that's something that you're finding is a problem, then the goal ultimately is to think about being calorically flexible. So going back to the answer I said to Janet originally, which was think about the food that you take in over a longer period of time, rather than just 24 hours. Try and manage your calorie balance over like just a continuous period of time, maybe 2-3 days ahead, maybe a week ahead. If you overconsume 300 calories on one day, not because you ate more, but maybe you just didn't move as much, that's okay. You can still use those a little bit again, tomorrow. Maybe you can do a little bit more activity tomorrow. Maybe you can eat a little less food tomorrow. You can still kind of balance those things out. So if you're in that scenario, I would advise that you do the following. Try and look a day ahead, and based off what you've got coming up, or a week ahead, and based off what you've got coming up, let's say, for example, you've got like a higher workload day and a lower workload day, decide whether or not it's easier if you're still trying to balance your body weight. Decide whether or not, depending on what you've got coming up, whether it's easier for you to do more exercise for 20-30 minutes and kind of accumulate those 200-300 calories, or whether it's easier for you to just eat a little bit less at one of your meals. maybe making up 200, 300 calories. So it depends on a lot of things. If you're training, maybe you don't want to eat any less calories because maybe you're already hungry. So maybe you could just do a little bit more cardio or a little bit more stuff. Like, you could train for an extra 20, 30 minutes or cut some time out at the end of your day to go for a walk, the start of your day to go for a walk. But look at what's easiest. Look at the low hanging fruit for you. So for me right now, I would say personally, I'm eating a reasonable amount. Some days I'm hungry at the end of the day. Some days I'm not, but I'm eating a normal amount. So for me, probably the easiest thing to do is just do a little bit more exercise. So whilst I'm waiting for my dinner to cook, I have an assault bike in the kitchen. Don't ask why, but I just ride the assault bike for 10 to 15 minutes. And like, that's where I'm accumulating the extra exercise, right? I know not everybody has an assault bike, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, go for a walk for 20, 30 minutes, maybe on your lunch break, first thing in the morning or after work when things are finished. But that's how you could look at it. Alternatively, if you feel like you're pretty good with food and you could probably afford to eat a little less and you don't necessarily have the option to ride the assault bike or go for a walk, then if you feel like you could cut out an extra 200, 300 calories, look at the low hanging fruit of where you're going to get that from. Okay. So the best way to do that is usually to look at things that have additional fat in them. And maybe, like we talked earlier on about a serving of peanut butter, a tablespoon of peanut butter has got about 100, 150 calories in it. Just have 2 less tablespoons of peanut butter for that day and you'll be okay. Right? Maybe you just skip the peanut butter in your morning smoothie, or you skip the peanut butter in your evening snack, and you'll be all right. Like, that's a great way to just trim a little bit of fat out of your diet or out of that particular day, and you can kind of make up that deficit that way. What I wouldn't do is cut out the lean proteins and carbohydrates that you need for recovery and energy, respectively. Think a little bit easier about, think more specifically about where you can make the easiest adjustment, because nothing's ideal. But fat is the place to make the easiest adjustment from, especially if you're not necessarily missing out on fat in other areas. So if you're eating a bit of red meat and you're eating some nuts or something else somewhere else, eggs, you're already getting a decent amount of fat in your diet. So think about where you could potentially chop that out and just kind of drop some calories there. All right. However, you're in a different scenario where you're still aiming to get your nutrition under control, then really nothing changes. Perform some meal prep is what I would say. Some form of meal prep, find a way to do that. So that can look different from person to person. I know a handful of people that I work with do the meal prep in different ways. So sometimes I will make all my meals ahead of time. So 4 meals a day for 7 days in a row. And I'll look ahead at my week. And if I've got a really busy week coming up, that's how I'll approach it. If right now I'm doing a little bit more work from home, I'm just doing some batch cooking. So I'm cooking some chicken for 3 days, I'm cooking some rice for 3 days, and I've got some vegetables that would be pretty easy for me to chop up and stick in a pan or microwave or whatever. But that's the level of maybe preparation that I need right now. Don't really need much more than that, but some form of preparation. And bearing in mind that, like, this is my job, I still need some form of preparation, because I'm also human before I'm anything else. And I still need to be able to manage my habits, manage my environment. So that's my level of food prep right now. Okay. So it can literally look like anything, but think specifically about what you would say is the best use of your time for how and when it comes to meal prep. So batch cooking is one. Cooking all your most difficult meals. So let's say, for example, you struggle to eat breakfast, then go ahead and make breakfasts for the week. Look at how you can do that. Is it a smoothie that you make the night before, put it in the fridge, and you drink it before you get up when you get up in the morning? Don't drink it before you get up. Maybe it's something like, quick cut oats that you can go ahead and just chuck in some hot water on and put those in the microwave, whatever it might be. But again, look where you can make the smallest possible change that yields the biggest possible result is a good place to go about that. Aim to eat more greens at every meal. I think that's probably safe to say that could go for everybody, me, you, professional athletes, your grandma, it doesn't matter. Eat a bit more greens at each meal. So I always try and go for 2 handfuls, regardless of what that is. And when I say greens, I am specifically talking about greens. Vegetables are great, but if I'm eating peppers are very different than eating, 2 palmfuls of kale. The cruciferous nature of these things are going to give me more fiber, less calories, less starch, so on and so on. If I'm choosing potatoes, they're going to give me a slightly different level of nutrient involvement than if I'm eating something else, right? So if I'm eating kale. So when I say greens, try and get some more greens in your diet. So whether that means like, you know, frozen vegetables are a great option. Green beans, peas, doesn't really matter. But if they're green, start by eating those. That'd be a good place to go. Drink plenty of water still. I would always say that one of our immediate strategies for helping people do things like curb hunger or boredom, and you've probably heard this one before, this is definitely not a new one, but it's just like wait 10 minutes and grab a glass of water before you go and eat something, because the likelihood is that you can understand your hunger response a little bit more. So start with some extra water and make sure that you're drinking plenty of it throughout the day. Stick with lean meats and proteins. Yeah, you need protein, but it doesn't have to come in the form of order out Shake Shack. It doesn't have to come that way. You can still buy frozen meats. You can still buy ground beef and make your own burgers. What I would say is think specifically about who you're giving the keys to the car to when it comes to eating food in general. The more you can make on your own, the better the choices you can make, just inherently a little more healthy. If you have the keys to the car, you can decide whether you need a stick of butter in it. If you order out, whoever's making it puts that stick of butter in it, and it's yours now. If you're going to eat, you're going to take that stick of butter with you. So try and eat as much kind of home cooked food as you possibly can. So I'm not saying anything revolutionary here. Eat more vegetables and try and cook a little bit on your own. Not crazy. And as I said, this goes for me, you, professional athletes, and your grandma. These strategies can be kind of extrapolated for most people. So yeah, most of all, whatever you do, control your calories. However you look at it, maybe you're going to try and create a little bit more of a calorie deficit through training a little bit more because potentially you have more time to do it, or you're getting better recovery because you're getting more sleep. Alternatively, if you're not getting those things, look to try and see where you can limit your calorie intake. So maybe you cut out that extra spoonful of peanut butter, maybe you cut out that second midday snack of, you know, a bag of almonds or whatever it might be. But think about where you can make those deliberate choices to chop it down, okay? I've kind of likened this, a couple of people, I've likened the scenario of being in quarantine to being injured. So if you've ever been injured, like about a year and a half ago, I broke my wrist. And I was in a cast for 4 months, and I could still kind of do stuff, but I couldn't do all the things that I wanted to do. If you've ever been in a boot or you've ever been in a cast, and like you've still been able to do most things, but like showering was a pain in the backside, and you know, maybe exercising was a little bit more difficult than it used to be. We're not in that much of a different scenario, but you can always control something. So look at the things that you feel like you can control. So during this time, think about making the choices that are going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, the smallest possible change that yields the biggest possible result. Okay. And oftentimes we can do that through the addition of exercise, but exercise takes time and it takes like a deliberate nature, right? If I want to go and burn 200, 300 calories, I need to take 20 to 30 minutes out of my day to go and do that. If that 20, 30 minutes is in addition to something I've already done, that might be too much. It routinely takes about 10 seconds to eat a little bit less, or prepare a little bit less, or deliberately cut out eating the extra thing of a bit of peanut butter. That takes no time at all. So if it's time crunch that's a bit of an issue for you, think more towards food. If you feel like you're pretty good with food, or you're enjoying your food, or even if you're just too anxious to adjust your food, think more about doing a little bit more activity. Nothing is going to magically replace either of those things, but where would you feel like you would be a bit more comfortable kind of putting more of your time and effort, right? So in addition, the last little bit of that is try and keep less inefficient foods. Notice how I said less inefficient and not bad, but less inefficient foods out of the house. Limit treats where possible, and understand that not every meal is a celebration. Not every meal has to be like this wild thing where you enjoy everything and it's like the best time of your life and it transports you back to like a time when you were a kid. Those meals are great, but not every meal needs to look like that. And right now, obviously, we've got a good amount of emotions going on. A lot of us are feeling a bit more stressed than we would usually do, a bit more anxious than maybe we usually do. And food is a great way to kind of, like, as a comfort mechanism, because it takes us to, or it can take us to a time where we felt pretty comfortable and we've enjoyed certain things. But the strategies that we talked about a minute ago, like maybe making your own version of that, or not ordering out Chinese food because it reminds you of your family, that kind of stuff. Like, I worked with a client who, she said, I really like sticky rice and General Tso's chicken. I'm like, okay, great. can you make those things? And she went ahead and made them, felt much better for it, didn't put a load of oil in it, still tasted delicious. She emailed me about it and said it was a great, she really enjoyed doing it, and she did it with a boyfriend and blah, 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 blah. But she still got the same result, but she just saved herself probably 500, 600 calories. She also didn't make too much and then consume it 3 days later. So think about the things that you can control. Don't try and reinvent the wheel here and change everything all at once. When it comes to trying to maintain your body weight, think about the strategies we've talked about today and in the previous weeks. And yeah, think about the smallest possible change that you can make that can yield the biggest possible result. Okay, so whether it's the addition of one thing or the subtraction of something else or an amalgamation of both of those, they're going to be the best options for you. All right, that is ultimately all I've got today. 3 of the big questions for the week. Probably the biggest question was the last one there. Thanks for listening to my rant on juice cleanses. Well, not really a rant, but thanks for listening to me about juice cleanses. You don't need them. Just eat vegetables. You'll be fine. If you have any questions, you can start sending them me right now. You can send them me anytime next week. We're going to keep doing this every Wednesday, 12 o'clock. Ask me what you want to ask me. And if you need a very specific answer, this is the time to do it. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Peace.